Welcome back, everybody. My name is Gamma Trap, one word, and today we are covering stone. Now, this is part of a stone playlist. Each of these are in their own individual video, but if you want to get the most comprehensive view of how I go about making these stylized stone pieces, you might want to start from the beginning, but they are all separated in case there's one you're looking for in particular. I have a lot more stone tutorials planned, but I wanted to take this into small bite-sized chunks. These 4 have been recorded, and I'm just finishing the editing on them all. To find the other ones, you can check the playlist or check the video description down below for the links to each of these videos. And if there's something else you're looking for in particular, feel free to leave it in the comments down below. But without further ado, let's get started. All right, so the first one we're going to do is a stone cube. We're going to do a basic shape that has flat planes that are easier to understand how light is going to work in conjunction with this material. So because we're making a cube or a cube-like, shape, we're going to be using just our lasso tool with a polygonal lasso tool. Polygonal. I don't know, a funny way to say that, but it's just so we can make, straight lines and not have to worry about our hands jittering or anything like that. So we're going to make a nice little cube-like shape, not quite a cube, just like that. And we're just going to grab a basic color. Now, to start, now that we got the shape we want down, let's go over these colors just real quick. Our lightest color, we don't really want to use white. There's nothing overly reflective about just regular stones. And these are stylized stones. These are stylized rocks, but there's nothing like, there's no metal, it's not water, it's not mirrors or anything like that at the moment. There can always be like magical effects, but so we don't want to go pure white almost ever, unless it's like hitting, like the sun's hitting it really hard, and it's a very shiny, polished kind of rock. It really depends on whatever you're drawing, but just basic average stone, probably want to avoid white, like way up here white. So right now we've got, we're going to use a lot of cool colors because I want these stones to be kind of more on the gray side, and you can always have more warm colors like this if the stone is more like a sandstone or it's in the desert. It's mostly predicated on the environment, and then with the lighting sources around it. But for now, these colors are all pretty much going to be cool colors. So we're just going to go from light to dark. It's just very cool gray. If we range it from like 1 to 5 and levels of like light to dark, it's probably like a 2, nothing crazy. And then you go to the darkest color. I'm have a little extra saturation in this one, meaning there's more color. So if way over here is less saturation, way over here is more saturation. I kind of like my shadows to be a little more saturated because if it's not saturated, like if it's less saturated, it tends to look more like just black or like dark gray, and you don't get the cool kind of color to it. And it's a little less vibrant. It's not really my style. And this is a very stylized piece we're going to be making here, so we want to make sure style is pretty important. And I like the whole vibrant kind of look. So I find the darker you get, the more saturated you might want to get, but not like overly saturated, because the way light and saturation and color works, nutshell, typically speaking, like the more light in an area, the more vibrant colors tend to be. This is kind of breaking that rule slightly, but it's just for effect. Because like if you have less saturated stuff, you'll find you're really fighting the black, because like having a black color just overrides almost everything. So it's much easier to have a shadow that's, got some color to it. But then it's just slow walks from here to here, pretty much. You're just gonna want to find little steps, and then the darker you get, the further closer towards, the edge down here. So with that done, now we can just do a simple clipping mask. Now on Photoshop and on Procreate, and I believe, obviously, maybe Clip Studio and Krita and all these other programs, they've all pretty much got their own version of a clipping mask. And on Photoshop, we're going to make a new layer above our shape layer. We're going to right-click it. We're going to do Create Clipping Mask. Now, this just makes so everything that you draw stays inside the shape that it's clipped to. See this arrow's pointing down? These squiggle lines are attached to this shape. So what we're going to do is let's just make the shadow thing first. So we're going to get our lasso tool again. We're going to find roughly where the bottom corner is of our cube. We're going to go up to the top. Then we're going to, we can overlap here. Remember, this is a clipping mask. So everything we draw outside there, won't be affected. We're just going to quickly throw in a little shadow area. Find out where you want the light, by the way. This is actually kind of important. You don't have to follow mine to the letter, but on my example, my light is going to be coming from the top left. And I actually made a layer to show where my light is coming from, just for visual effect and because it's kind of cool. Isn't that kind of neat? But we're not going to be using that right now. I just use that to show where my light's coming from. Okay, so we got our shadow layer on the opposite side of where the light's coming from. Now, the layer closest to the light, we can't see. It's not facing us, it's behind this. But the second closest layer to the light, we can see, and that's the top, because the light is coming from the top up here down towards this direction. So we're going to grab our, probably not our lightest, but our second to lightest. We're just going to put that in there. We're going to do the same for this layer. It's kind of an elaborate game of connect the dots. And this is just the initial shape. This is just to help with the color thing. We're going to take one step away. Yes, that's the basic shape. There we go. And you could obviously keep the other color if you wanted to. And now that we have this, this is a little too perfect. Stone is not an impervious material. It's not indestructible. Oftentimes it's got nicks and cuts and cool grooves and really awesome little marks that give it characterization. Like for example, like in the background here, I've got these little grooves and stuff in this little wall situation I got back here. So we're going to kind of do that. As usual, the brush we're using is going to be the hard round pressure opacity. It's a basic round brush. It's in every program. Every program has, it might be named different depending on the program you're using, but in Photoshop, it's the hard round pressure opacity, and you could use any brush you want. But I always try to make sure the brushes I use are more accessible to anybody. Now we're just going to cut in some deviations, meaning we're just gonna make this a little less perfect. So we're gonna take a little bit chunks off and just chips and erase just a bit off the edge. Make it look more like a rock, you could say. There we go. Now it's starting to look a little, almost automatically, just by doing that. Doesn't it look a little more like a stone, like a stone cut brick or a cube of some kind? Because we got the colors in, we got the values in, and we're starting to get some detail in. Now we can go back to our clipping mask, and we can do almost everything we want in this clipping mask to avoid messing with the overall shape of the cube. So now what we could do is just add in some more cuts, some more grooves for a little characterization. Now, because light's up here coming down, if we make a groove like this, that means the top of the groove is covered in shadow, whereas the bottom of the groove has light. To show you what I mean here, say here's the edge of our stone, so the light's coming from over here. This top half is in shadow because the light's coming down. This is like shade, like sitting under a tree. Whereas the bottom half, you could probably actually make this different color to make it easier to understand. There we go. Whereas this plane, this line here, this bottom part of the groove is actually facing directly towards the light, making it a nice, well-lit, more lighted area. So what I tend to like to do is add little characterizations in the stone. So I'll grab the dark shadow area of wherever it is. It could be up here even too. And I'll put that on the top, and I'll grab the more lit side, and I'll put that on the bottom. We can add a couple more of these. Make them different, We don't want a bunch of sameness, because I don't know if you've seen any of my other stylized tutorials, but so the typical rules of stylized work is shapes within shapes, don't be boring, and the rule of cool in whatever order, right? So the rule of cool means it doesn't have to actually make sense as long as it looks cool to a certain extent. So if it doesn't make sense, it better look cool. It better look pretty cool. That's the rule of cool, right? If it doesn't look cool and it doesn't make sense, it's not good. Whereas shapes within shapes, for example, we've got our little triangle situation inside here. And we'll do more shapes within shapes later on, because right now the shape is a square, and we're going to make a little more grooves and cuts and squiggles and stuff like that. And then the other rule, don't be boring. If you have just groove, 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 and they're all the same shape, and they all look the same, and they're all in like a uniform pattern, one, boom, 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 1, 2, 3, and they all kind of like that. It has a little more characterization, sure, but they're all like uniformly placed. They're all like, bup, 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 almost like a computer did it, almost like it was there on purpose. That's what I mean by don't be boring. If it looks like it's predictable, it's boring, and you want to try and avoid that as much as possible. But because, let's go back to the lighting thing with the grooves. So because we got these grooves here, say we got a groove right there, because it might not be like a groove like it's cut in like that on the edges here, but it is a groove. So we can take the light, we can throw it on right there. We can find the other bits of groove, because the light's coming from up here, hitting down there. We could kind of light this entire edge gently. We don't have to go crazy. And if we wanted to, we can light this edge over here, but not with the highlight layer. We go into the secondary light layer because this edge is not hitting directly to the light. The entire process here is a step process. We step, meaning which direction is light coming from? Okay, so how many steps away from the light source is this? So this is pretty much 1 step away because light's hitting it. And this is 2 steps away because the light's hitting this. I need my drawing layer. The layer behind this layer, and it's hitting this layer, but it's not hitting this layer. So that means it is, so it's like 1, 2. So it's 2 steps away, meaning we're going to use a shade darker. And this layer over here, so it's technically it's 2 steps away, but because it's on the opposite side of the light, we're going to say it's 3. So it's, 1, 2, 3. See what I'm saying? It's a little weird to figure out, but once you get it, just think of it like a 3D space. The more you think of it in a 3D space, the easier this whole process is going to be. But let's add some more grooves up here. So light's coming from up here. All right, now let's add some top grooves. Now these are grooves on just this edge here. And these edges are still pretty uniform. They're pretty boring. They're just straight lines. So the more we mess with everything that looks like it was like chiseled and is on purpose, better we can make this look. So we're just gonna rough up all these edges if we can. Then we can add a little bit of detail, a little bit of grooves. Maybe add a little groove cut in there. Now you gotta start worry about like little cut details, and the details work the same way as the cut grooves and the edges here. So no matter where we are, say for example we're gonna cut a groove into this. We're gonna use a really common stylized stone cut shape. It's just a I don't know what you would call it. But we're remember the step process, because we're cutting into this, we're adding a shadow. So we're going to grab the 1 step darker shade to make that shadow. But because these are grooves in the stone, how do we do the 1 step process to show the light hitting the bottom part of the stone? We're probably going to grab up here to 1 step lighter. We're going to add it to the bottom of all those grooves. Hopefully not make it look silly. There we go. That's good enough. And we're adding the light on the opposite direction of where the light's coming. So the light source is up here. The light is going to be added to the opposite side of the groove from the light source. So say a light source is right here. You have a groove. Think of where the light source is. The side closest to that groove gets the dark, and the side opposite of that groove gets the light. And we can clean this up a little later, but right now we're just putting in our basic kind of shapes. Now, to make these communicate with the other side, we are going to do a step down process again. The shadow's a little too harsh. I have to actually bump that up. We're adding another color to the color. Remember, the way I picked that was the line, right? So like the line just goes up like here. It's go boop, 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 boop. See, it goes from like here to here, kind of by diagonal look. So all I gotta do is just find a nice little spot between there. So now if I do it, it looks much better. Not as harsh, not as crazy. Okay, so now we're gonna add a groove into this side. So we're gonna have it come up from here. Let's just clean that up a little bit. Now, again, the rule of cool and the don't be boring, these lines are pretty boring. So we can actually add a little bit of curve to them to make them less boring. Give them a little extra flavor, you know? And the same could be true on this side too. So we can add a little bit of flavor to these grooves and cuts. Now it looks a little more interesting. And looking interesting is exactly what you want to accomplish with any stylized piece. And we're just doing the step up process. So because this is in shadow, one step lighter than this is this. So we grab this color, and that is going to be the bottom part of these grooves to show them off, to show that they are living in a 3D space. They're not just paint. Like they're not just painted onto the stone. See, if you didn't show that they had if it didn't look like a groove, like it had an indentation, like it was actually cut into the stone, it'll just look like it was painted, which is a good look. It's pretty cool, but it's not. It's easier to imagine that stone's been cut. Cut stone's a really cool look. And now we can add just a couple extra grooves and cuts. And now for the real juice of the stylized stone, we're going to add a highlight groove. Is really in the category of rule of cool. It doesn't actually make much sense, but it looks kind of cool. So people tend to do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the highlight area, the highlight color, and we're going to start kind of simply tracing down the edges of this rock. And we're going to round these edges out a bit. So you're going to see me do this in the future stones. You're going to be like, oh, and you're going to notice this too. Like if you're playing League of Legends or something, or any other stylized, usually any other stylized game, or looking at a stylized sort of like setting, and you're going to see these grooves and you're going to go, oh, yeah, that's not supposed to be. I don't get that. Why? It looks cool, but I don't get it. Like this is going to become a thing that you are going to notice more and more. Let's add a little extra groovage. So we're just gonna take a couple extra cuts. Now another thing that really sell that it's stone is this side is still pretty unremarkable. It's still pretty flat. It's still pretty not much life's happening on these stones, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to give it a little bit of texture. And the way we do that is very gentle. So let's start with our medium side here. I'm going to grab that. We're just going to gently kind of brush on just any kind of shape, trying our best not to overwhelm anything. We're going to grab the main color, which is, this one over here. And we're just going to brush kind of inside that shape. Gently, not overcoming anything, letting it kind of speak for itself in its own little way, giving it like letting a shadow still be shown of it. So we're gently brushing. I have pressure opacity turned on, so that means the harder I press, the more opaque the circle will be. That's one of the cool things about this particular brush. And you don't have to do that, but it makes this job a lot easier. Now, as long as it's not predictable and boring, we're in the clear. And we can keep doing this for every side. That's kind of what I started doing in the top area here. We're just going to grab our shadow here. That's one step down from this. We're going to do the same thing. Gently just kind of stroke it in there. Grab the actual color, the main layer. And we're just going to let like little shadows like still exist on this stone. Like notice how you can kind of barely see them now. We're going to kind of keep that. And you could go the other direction too. You could go lighter to show the grooves, the indentations. So if you see these shadows, you can say, okay, so that's probably the bottom of the shadow. And you're going to apply the lighter layer to the bottom side of these indentations. It's not a groove like that. It's more like a little plane like this. You know, it's just like a little indentation. It's almost the same. There's very little difference. That's why it has to be very, very careful with the light difference. Now we're going to kind of clean up these little highlights. We're going to make them a little thinner, make them a little harder to see. And we're going to do the opposite side here too. So we're going to grab our lighter layer because we're taking a step. This cube, by the way, is like the main hub of it's going to be the main point that I'm going to bring back to you in all of these other stone videos. That's why this video is a little longer. Just know that there's a reason for all this. I won't go nearly this in detail of the future stone videos because I'm explaining this all here. So if you're here from one of my other videos because you watched those first, welcome. Hope this is helpful. Now we're going to add some cracks. We're going to add some like actual cracks to the stone, and the cracks will follow the same rules as every one of these other steps. So let's actually use these. Go up to there. So this is an elaborate connect the dots game we're doing right here. We make points and we just kind of connect them. Now I've made a how to draw rocks video a while ago. And if you practice that and you've kind of figured out how to draw rocks, the cracks here should be very, very simple to figure out. And we're doing the light thing, remember, so the opposite edge of these cracks towards the light. Here's the lines of the cracks. The opposite side of the cracks from the light, get the light. So we grab the light. We're going to put it on the opposite sides of these cracks. You can try to clean these cracks up a bit because they're pretty messy. If the cracks are the same width throughout the entire stone structure, that's how I should use this. It's not so in the way. That's not a very impressive crack. It's not a very good realistic or cool crunch and destruction of the stone. You want the size and width of the crack to vary. So you'll notice that this part of the crack is much thicker than this line. Now to really seal the deal, we're coming up to the top, more well-lit layers. So we're going to grab the one step down as our shadow. We're going to cut across here to make this crack more believable, like it's been chopping straight through the corner of the stone. And now actually while we're here, we can probably do more highlights thing just real quick over here. Just gonna drag that kind of highlight thing like we did on the edges here. And this is our highlight that doesn't make sense, but it looks cool. I'm just gonna clean it up. And remember, we're just using the color, the step up thing. So it's the light plane. We're gonna use the lightest color. And we're not gonna go all the way across. Because remember, that's uniform, that's predictable, that's expected, that's boring. We don't wanna do that. And we don't need to do this highlight cool edge thing over here because that's the opposite side of the light source. But if you wanted to, this is extra credit, you could if you wanted to. You can have the highlight corner closest to the viewer. And that's actually something that also gets done a lot. We're just adding some grooves and stuff. Not bad. So we turn that off. Now it's not distracting anymore. All right, so now what we're gonna do is an overall lighting scenario. And this we're gonna make a new layer for, again, clipping mask. Now, so for the overall lighting scenario, this sort of just helps cement the idea that this is a 3D object in 3D space. What we're gonna do is we're gonna get a soft brush. Again, this is just the soft round pressure opacity. And we added another layer, we made it a clipping mask. We're gonna grab our shadow layer here. On the bottom closest to the dirt, can add just a soft brushing, very soft, of our darkest color. Now another way to do this, which is safe, very safe, not as destructive or chaotic as blanket brushing on a color. We could do also is grab just any of these colors that you prefer and make this into a multiply layer. This is something a little more. It preserves the detail that you've already painted. It lessens the chance of you just covering all the detail you did completely. So we're actually going to make a multiply layer for the shadow, for the overall shadow. We're going to grab one of our medium colors here, probably that one. And we made a new layer, we made it a clipping mask, but we're also going to make it a multiply layer. Now this layer blending style thing, this is also in Procreate, I know for a fact. I'm not sure about the other ones. It probably is. It almost certainly is. It might be called something different. We're just going to gently, with our soft brush, very gently, place that multiply layer on the bottom. Now we can soften this up some more and clean it up by using a soft eraser if you feel like you've put a little too much. So if you just went crazy, which can still look cool, you know, if you want to change the overall color, it can still look cool if you want to change it from like a stone to, I don't know, onyx or something. But we're just gently adding this kind of shadow in the bottom area. And again, this just helps solidify the notion that this is sitting in a 3D space. And you want the side with the less light on it to have just a little extra, just a tiny extra bit, not too much, of the multiply layer, of the shadow. And you want that soft brush to be nice and big. And now, to help solidify the notion more, if you want to, that it's sitting in a 3D space, what we could also do is add another layer, make it a clipping mask again. I know we're making a lot of masks, but that's how it is sometimes, and we'll flatten it down later. Make this one an overlay layer. We're gonna grab our lightest color, and again, very gently. Keep your brush kind of big, but not as big as before. We don't need it that big. And on the layer closest to us, so this corner right here, for example, is closest to us. And it's the most well-lit closest to us corner, I should say. We're gonna softly brush in just a bit of that overlay layer. Now again, if it's too harsh on the edges, just use a soft eraser to kind of get rid of it. And if you want to keep trying, you can keep, you know, pushing it back and forth like so until you find the sweet spot that you really like. And then you can do whatever extra stuff you think needs to it, you know, for the extra polish. And I do think actually I'm going to add more highlight on the edges here, just because the background and this cube are kind of bleeding into each other at the moment because they're roughly the same values, which is very difficult to combat without adding a little extra rim light. And because this is stylized, you don't have to worry too much about, like, you know, oh, that doesn't make sense. Because remember, we got the rule of cool to lean on, but as long as it looks cool. If it doesn't look cool, and you're in a tight spot. I'm just gonna turn those layers off so I can clean this up with the right color. That's a little better. Nice. And now, I'm just gonna add a base for it to sit on. And of course, for those who know me, I'd like to do a little extra credit. So I added some brush on the bottom side of the cube to make it look like it's actually sitting on a grass and dirt surface. And all that really is you just take the color of the grass, the dirt, or whatever's underneath the rock, and just kind of brush over it and just break up that straight line that was there. Because again, we don't want to be boring. Straight lines are pretty boring when it comes down to even cubes in a stylized sense. So we're going to just want to break those up with some grass and dirt. And I added a little bit of a warmth to the edge where the light's coming from. And I just did that with an adjustment layer. We just added a little extra yellow, a little extra red just on the top area there and just kind of closer to the edge where the light source is. If you would like to learn how to do that, I have a tutorial on that. You can look up how to color from grayscale to color. My tutorial on adjustment layers and gradient maps. I just did that. It's really simple, really fast. It's not that difficult. Thank you so much to my amazing patrons. I appreciate the ever loving out of you for supporting the ever loving out of me. Look forward to the rest of my stone series that's coming out. They're all finished, they're all recorded. I'm just editing them all. And again, this is the longest one. The other ones should be a little shorter, and they should just kind of cover how to do basic other textures and shapes. And the rest of them will, like, if they have like, how to do grooves and how to cut, cracks and stuff, I'll just point them to this video to save some time. So I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free again to leave it a like if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and hit the bell if you'd like to know when the next tutorial is dropping. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.